What's more satisfying than miniature books? In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make them in any scale. So let's get started. There are millions of books that you could make, so obviously you need to start by picking the books that you want to make. If you really don't care what the book is, then hop on your computer and search for something like printable books 1/12 scale, printable book covers. There are printable pages available ready to go with little to no effort. But what do you do when you have a very specific book in mind, but you cannot find a good image of the front, the back, and the spine? You could take a picture of that book, but that's really not going to give you a perfect image. Instead, let's recreate the back cover and the spine ourselves. We're going to do some simple graphic design, but don't worry.
I'm freaking out, man. You are freaking out, man.
I'll walk you through it. It's pretty easy. First, go download and install a free program called Inkscape using the link in the description below. Go grab a copy of the front cover of the book you want to create from the internet and paste it into the new Inkscape project. Now, create a rectangle the same size as the front cover and shift it to the left. This will become your back cover. Now create another rectangle between the two covers. This is going to be the spine of the book. You can choose a size within reason, and this is really going to become the thickness of your book. We want to make the back and spine match the color scheme of the front cover. So use the color picker tool to select one of the colors from the front cover. You could leave this the way it is as a solid color, but I want to take this up a notch. Most back covers have some sort of design on them, and I like using pictures of trees, but you can use mountains or anything really to give it a little added texture. Now we need to match the color of the image better to the book cover. Go to the filters menu, then to color, and then color shift. Click the live preview box so we can see the change and use the slider to find the right color tone to match the book cover. Don't worry about getting it perfect. We just need it to be in the ballpark, and then move it behind your two shapes by going to Object and then go to Lower. But Tech, now I can't see my picture. Now we're going to adjust the opacity of the rectangles we made earlier to let a little bit of the design show through, but not too much. If your design is too obvious, you can blur it a bit by clicking the Filters menu, then go to Blurs, then go to Blur, and again, use the live preview button, and then use the sliders to move it both horizontal and vertical to get exactly the blur that you want. Now it's just a matter of replicating the look of the back cover with text, logos, and other stuff. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but you can go as simple or exact as you'd like. Start with the story summary, which you can grab from the book description on Goodreads or on Amazon. Match the front as best as you can, then just replicate the rest of the items that might be on the back and spine, like a barcode and publisher logo, etc. For the spine, I tend to just go very simple and just put the name of the book, rotating the text so it's running up and down. Now, the most important thing to consider really is the scale you're printing, which will dictate just how much detail you actually need to put into your back cover and spine. The smaller it is, the less accurate you need it to be. But you can make it as accurate and detailed as you like, and the benefit of doing it in this Inkscape program is that it's a vector-based editor, so as you scale up and down, you don't lose any resolution. Now, your printer, on the other hand, will have a huge impact on just how nice those prints are going to come out. But Tech, you say, why not take a picture of the back cover instead of recreating it? And you certainly could, so long as you have perfect lighting to eliminate all glare and position your camera perfectly to get a perfectly level picture. It would work, but I prefer the Inkscape method because it's a lot easier for me. Once I'm satisfied with the finished product, I'll export it to a PNG file and hop on over to Microsoft Word, which I find is a lot easier to print these off from. Import your completed books and adjust the sizing for the scales you want. I usually will print a 1/6 scale and a 1/12 scale set of books. That way then I have both. After it's printed, we need to cut them down to size. but leave a small margin of white paper around each book, and I leave it in rows just to make it easier for the next step. Grab an Elmer's glue stick and lay a scrap of paper down to keep the glue from getting all over. Flip a strip of your printed books over and apply the glue to the entire back, leaving no spots open. Apply the glue pulling away from your hand that's holding it down so the glue stick doesn't bind the paper and crease it or rip it. There's 2 reasons I don't like using liquid PLA or Mod Podge glue for this. Number 1, liquid glue tends to dry slower, around 12 or more hours.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Number 2, the liquid glue is usually too wet
Moisture is the essence of wetness.
and can cause rippling or tears and possibly changes in the integrity of the paper and the ink, which is not going to be good. We'll be gluing the print onto a thicker cardstock, or in my case, I use manila folders. Line it up to maximize the amount of books you can make from a single folder, and use something like a credit card to smooth out the paper so it presses evenly so you get full coverage. The glue is going to take about 30 minutes to dry, so finish up gluing all of your book covers, and then when it's dry, you can cut out the strips from the hardstock. Do your best to cut it perfectly on the lines to remove all white. Now, the cleaner you cut this now, the cleaner your books are going to turn out when they're finished. Now, I don't print directly on cardstock or hardstock, mainly because of this next step, which is the fold step. Thicker paper tends to crack when folded due to the fiber structure of the paper.
He's cracking.
Standard printer paper is a little less likely to crack, but we want to take it a step further to prevent our book covers from cracking and looking kind of overly weathered. Before folding, I brush a thin layer of water on the fold lines. Then, using my metal ruler, I line up the seam and gently fold. Dampening that paper just a bit will make the paper and ink a bit more flexible, but do be careful not to overdo the water or the paper will tear. When you don't do this, the creases can crack, which might be the look that you're looking for, but if you don't want this, then give this method a shot for cleaner folds. We've got perfectly stunning looking book covers now. Now we need to create the pages. So sift through all your scrap foam chunks and find some pieces that are close to the thickness that you're going to need. For most of the 1/12 scale books, the poster board foam will work just fine. Otherwise, your high density foam that you use for walls and other dial parts will work perfectly. Rather than measuring, I use the front cover of the books I just made to trace around to get the pieces sized just how I need. So carefully cut them out using a very sharp blade to prevent that dull blade tear. Then sand it down so it's just the right thickness. Before going too far, you're going to need to decide the aesthetic of your book covers. Some books have an overlap of the cover and others are flush with the pages, so you'll want to decide when getting your fit just right. Now, you may also want to address the edge of the cover to color it appropriately. This can be as simple as using a Sharpie that matches the cover color fairly closely, or you may need to find paint that matches. Either way, carefully apply that color and let it dry fully before moving on. Now, you can also leave the edge as is if you like that look. Back to the page insert. Let's give our foam the look of pages now. You'll need an X-Acto knife to carefully cut a shallow series of cuts the length of the edges, leaving the binding edge alone. Now don't cut too deeply and try not to continually cut in the same groove unless you want your pages to look a little less uniform. Try to keep your lines from overlapping and weaving also. So keep them straight so they appear like pages once they're painted. And lastly, be very careful. Last thing you need to do is slice any of those silly fingers off before you've even finished one book. When you're satisfied with your page inserts, it's time to get painting. Set up your paint station with some toothpicks and line up each book insert with its cover to keep them together. I target lighter colors, usually on the brown spectrum, but you can play around with your base color as much as you like. For the smaller 1/12 scale books, you can paint all sides since they're fairly small, but on the larger scale books, I usually only paint the exposed edges and part of the top and bottom sides to ensure no pink shows through. Let this dry entirely and then make a wash using a darker brown. Now you could use black, but more subtle coloring might make this better. And I usually only do about 2 coats to get the look that I'm looking for. You could call it done at this point, or you can take this another step further and make some of your books really fancy. A few things you can do are to dry brush some metallic bronze on the page edges, which will give it a really nice bronze shimmer that will make it look like a much fancier book. You could also create bookmark or end bands, which will really take these miniatures over the top. Back to our glue station now for the final assembly. Grab another scrap of paper and your Elmer's glue stick and carefully apply an even coat of glue to the inside of the front and back covers. Glue on the spine really isn't that important, but it also doesn't hurt. Wipe away any excess glue off the edges and be very careful to minimize the amount of glue that you get on the prints itself. Insert the pages, hopefully in the correct direction, and press together, but not too hard. Use a heavy book, preferably with a glossy cover, which will help prevent the miniatures from adhering to your press and damaging your miniatures. Again, wait 30 minutes for the glue to dry, and you're done. Now that you know how to make miniature books, you won't be lying when you tell your friends you just finished 30 books in one day. Let me know if you give this a shot. Tag me on Instagram with the pics of your new miniature book collection. Don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, the bell notification, and until next time, I will see you later.
They call me a